I think we are in a very important phase. We are moving forward along the right path. But as I said before, it's also time to speed up. To speed up and show the teeth to these individuals. If they are not stopped in time, then when we do stop them, it will be too late. When the world found out that Hitler or Mussolini were a threat to the world, there were many that got together and decided to do something. I believe that many need to get together and realize that Nicolas Maduro, Diosdado Cabello, Tareq al-Assami, and other important groups of individuals that make a living by the regime in Venezuela are a threat. They are a threat, I insist, not only to Latin America and to America, but also to the whole world.
Just how did Iván Simonovis, a former police chief of Caracas, the Venezuelan capital, end up a political prisoner sentenced to 30 years? And how did he escape? How is Venezuela transformed by the socialist regimes of Hugo Chavez and Nicolas Maduro? And how have terrorist and criminal organizations like Hezbollah set up shop in Venezuela, apparently with the regime's blessing? In this episode, we sit down with Simonovis, who's currently serving as Special Commissioner for Security and Intelligence in the interim government of Venezuela headed by Juan Guaido, and acting as a liaison to the U.S. State Department. This is American Thought Leaders, and I'm Jan Jekielek. You have a pretty incredible story. You started out by being one of the most, I think, known police commissioners in the country of the capital of Caracas, and then you ended up spending 15 years in prison. First of all, how did that happen?
Yo empecé como detective de la Policía de Investigación Criminal en el año...
I started as a detective for the Criminal Investigative Police in 1981. I rose up the hierarchy, working in different areas of criminal investigation. Then I became chief of the Special Operations Unit. Being in high-ranking positions enabled me to establish contact and work together with Commissioner Will Bratton. At that time, he had just quit as police commissioner of New York. We tried implementing the strategies used in New York City and Caracas in order to reduce crime there. Several of the trainings I did for professional development were here in the United States, with the State Department, with the FBI and other investigative and intelligence agencies. That put me in a special category within my country, but it was also used against me, because once the political system in Venezuela changed with the arrival of Hugo Chavez, the communists that came into power started to see me not as a friend, but as an enemy. So that's how it started. They began a case against me because of my specialty and my knowledge. They even accused me of being a member of the CIA and that kind of thing. Then in 2002, there was an impressive demonstration in Caracas, when more than 1 million people went to the presidential palace to ask for Hugo Chavez's resignation, because a dictatorship was imminent. Hugo Chavez's supporters shot these people who were exercising their right to protest. 19 people died, and at least 100 were injured. Hugo Chavez stepped down from power for 3 days, and then he came back with the support of the military. At that time, they started to rewrite history in Venezuela.
en Venezuela. Nosotros,
Instead of
en
being the
lugar
people
de
who
ser
saved
personas que
lives, we were
salvaban vidas,
accused of causing deaths.
fuimos acusados de causar muertes. Hubo un
There was an allegation
alegato
that I
que
always said made
todavía
no
yo
sense at
siempre
all,
lo he dicho que no tiene sentido en ninguna parte del planeta Tierra, porque ellos
because they
alegaban que las
alleged that the
personas que
people who
dispararon
opened fire on the
en la
demonstrators did so
manifestación,
because they were
digamos,
exercising their
estaban
legitimate
ejerciendo
right.
un legítimo derecho. ¿Cómo se ejerce
How
un
can you
legítimo derecho? Una
exercise a
persona
legitimate
que no
right
está
if you are
autorizada
not
para portar
authorized to
armas,
use a
no
weapon,
está investido de autoridad
and you don't have
contra
authority
un
to go
policía
against a uniformed
totalmente
police
uniformado
officer,
e investido de
an
autoridad?
authority figure?
Pero esas son las cosas
But those are the
extrañas
strange
que
things that
suceden
happened
en
in
el país.
Venezuela.
Ya Hugo Chávez tenía el
Hugo
control
Chavez already had
del
control
Poder
of the
Judicial
judiciary,
y el caso es
and so we
que
were taken to
fuimos a un
court in a
juicio
trial that was
que
totally
fue
rigged.
totalmente amañado y
And as I
como
said
dije
before,
anteriormente, pues yo era el
I was
blanco
the main
principal
target
porque había sido
because I was trained or I had
entrenado o
taken
por
some
haber
professional
participado en un
development
curso
training in the United
de
States.
mejoramiento profesional en los Estados Unidos. Este juicio se dilató
This trial
aproximadamente
went for
3
around
años y medio
3.5 years,
y al
and
final
in the end, some
unos
teammates of the
compañeros de la
uniformed
policía
police and I were
pero
sentenced to
fuimos
30
condenados a
years in
30
prison.
años de prisión. 30 años de prisión es la
30
pena
years in
máxima que
prison is the
existe en
maximum
mi país.
sentence in my country.
A mí me mantuvieron
So I was held
me
prisoner
mantuvieron
in the
detenido
political police
en la
headquarters.
sede de la policía política. Ahí estuve
I
los
was there
primeros
for the
9
first
años
9
de
years in
prisión,
prison,
donde
where I
solamente
only saw
tuve
sunlight
acceso
for
a
33 days.
33 días.
All
Todos
the
los
other
demás
days I
estuve
was secluded
encerrado
in a
en
cell
una
where I couldn't
celda
tell if it was day or
donde no
night.
sabía si era de día o de noche, no
I
sabía si
didn't know
era
if it was
llovido, si
raining
hacía
or
sol,
sunny.
no se
I didn't
sabía
know
nada, no
anything
sabía
about
nada
the
de lo que
outside
pasaba
world.
en el mundo
Those were the
exterior.
first 9
Esos
years
fueron
of
los
prison.
primeros 9 años de
After these
prisión.
9 years in prison,
Luego de estos 9 años de prisión,
So, just to get this straight, you were in solitary confinement for those first 9 years?
no, es decir, yo estaba en un pasillo.
no, I mean I was in a hallway which could hold
Había
10
capacidad
political
para
prisoners.
tener 10 presos políticos.
In the 9 years, the
De
other
9 años,
political prisoners
los presos
changed,
políticos fueron
but
cambiando,
I
el
did
que
not
cambió era yo.
change.
Yo
I
seguí
always
siendo el mismo.
remained.
Pero bueno, por ahí
But I
pasaron
saw
diferentes
different political
figuras
figures,
políticas,
military
pasaron
officers.
militares,
But my sentence
pero
was
mi
for
condena
30
era de
years,
30 años, mi
the
condena era
maximum
la pena
sentence.
máxima que había. Entonces,
So I
así como
welcomed and I
recibí
said goodbye to many people.
recibí personas que dejaron,
I welcomed
llegaron
people who
presas,
got
dejé
imprisoned
personas que
and said
obtuvieron
goodbye to
la
people
libertad.
who were released.
Luego de estar todo
So
ese
after
tiempo
spending all
en
that
esta
time in this
celda,
cell,
en esta
in this dungeon,
mazmorra, mis condiciones físicas
my
empezaron
physical
a
condition
deteriorarse
started to
y
deteriorate,
empecé a presentar problemas
and I started to have all kinds of
ortopédicos,
issues,
algunas patologías
with some
un poco más
illnesses more
complicadas unas
complicated
que
than
otras.
others.
Problemas de
I
la
had
vista,
problems with my
problemas
sight,
en la columna
problems with my
vertebral,
spine.
una lesión grave
I have a
en la
serious
columna,
spine injury,
problemas con la
respiratory
respiración,
issues, blood
problemas
pressure issues.
arteriales. Todas estas cosas se fueron
All these
poniendo
things
cada
started
vez
to
peor
worsen
porque
because I was locked
recinto,
up in a roughly
encerrado
5
dentro de
foot
una
by
celda
5
que
foot
medía
cell
1,5 por 1,5 que no
that
tenía
didn't
ni
even
baño,
have a toilet.
no tenía ni siquiera un sitio para ir. Mis abogados, en especial
My
mi esposa,
lawyers, especially my
es
wife.
abogado y
My
ella
wife
me
is a
ejerció mi
lawyer, so she was
defensa.
my defense counsel.
Reclamó sobre mis
So she complained about
condiciones
prison
de
conditions.
reclusión y todo eso se llevó a diferentes instancias nacionales e
National and
internacionales
international attention
hasta que
got
llegó
to a
un
point where the
momento
regime saw they could not hide the
viéndose en
atrocities they were
evidencia
committing against me and
todas las
others.
atrocidades que estaban cometiendo en mi caso y en otros casos, decidieron
So they
sacarme
decided to move
de
me,
esa celda donde estaba,
but not to release
pero
me.
no para otorgarme libertad, ni mucho menos, sino me mandaron a una cárcel
Instead, I was
militar.
sent to a military prison
Se conoce como el nombre de
known
la
as
cárcel
Ramo
militar
Verde.
es en Ramo Verde. Está en un sitio
It's in a
montañoso,
mountainous area,
unos,
about 40 minutes away from the
30
capital
kilómetros de
city.
la capital. En esa cárcel, pues,
In that
donde
prison, my health
tampoco
didn't
me
improve
controlaban porque
because I was still in
se
jail,
quedaron
after
en la
all.
cárcel. Luego de esto, pues,
With the help of a team of lawyers
abogados,
and international pressure,
internacionales,
there were
había
pressures even from the
muchas
opposition
presiones
leaders
de
about my
de
condition.
oposición sobre mi condición. Y, bueno,
The
fue
regime
por todo
allowed me
el
to be
régimen
detained at home
permitió
instead of at the prison.
que ellos ese casa por cárcel, ¿no? Es bueno aclarar
It's good to
que
mention
ya
that by
yo
then I had
tenía
already served a good
gran
part of my
parte de
sentence.
la pena que la había
And
cumplido.
like anywhere
Y
else in the
como en todas
world,
partes del
when you
mundo,
are
cuando una
detained and you
persona está
serve part
detenida
of
y
your
cumple
sentence,
parte de la pena,
you're entitled to some
obviamente
alternative measures in order to
medidas
finish serving the sentence.
alternativas para terminar de cumplir la pena. A mí desde el año 2012 me
I had been
correspondían
entitled
medidas
to these other
alternativas al
measures
cumplimiento de
since
la pena, pero el
2012,
régimen no permitía
but the
que pudiese
regime
esa
didn't
libertad
allow me to get
condicional, como
probation.
se le conoce usualmente. Luego
Even at
estando en
home,
mi
I
casa,
didn't
pues
get medical
tampoco recibía
attention,
atención médica, no me trasladaban, yo no tenía
and I didn't have permission to
permiso de
receive
visita,
visitors or to
no
have
tenía
meetings.
autorización para reuniones.
They took photos of me
Era
between 6 to
fotografiado
8
entre
times a
6 y 8
day to
veces al
verify that
día
I was
para
still
verificar
there.
que yo estuviese allí. Tenía un grillete electrónico
I
en
had an
mi
electronic
pierna
shackle on my leg,
y
and I couldn't see a doctor.
tampoco tenía la posibilidad de ver a los médicos. Así que mi condición médica mejoró en
But
algunas
my
cosas.
medical condition improved
Obviamente,
somewhat
estás en tu casa,
because you
la
are at
atención de la
home
familia
and your
y
family
todo
takes
eso
care of
hace
you.
que de alguna forma
All that makes your
tu
mood,
estado
your
de ánimo, tu
mindset,
estado
and
mental
physical
y tu
condition
condición física
improve
mejore.
somewhat.
Pero problemas que habían que
But
atacar
some
desde un
issues
principio
simply couldn't be taken care of,
no se
even
podían
though they
atender.
needed to be addressed.
Es así
That's
como
how 4 years
pasaron
passed by.
casi unos 4 años y luego el año
Then last
pasado
year, in what is
me
known as
lo
the
que
April
se
30th
suscitó
event
en
that happened in
se
Venezuela,
conoce como el 30 de abril, donde hubo un
there was a coup
intento
attempt.
de golpe o de que los militares
The
se
military
alzaran
rose
en
up
contra
against President Maduro,
del presidente Maduro.
and there were some rumors
Empezó
that
a
I would
surgir
probably be
el
sent back to
tema que
jail.
muy posiblemente me regresarían a la cárcel a mí. El presidente Guaidó había firmado un
President Guaido had
documento
signed a
donde ahí,
document that I would be released
luego
once
que
his
se daba
administration came to
la
power.
instauración del gobierno total del presidente Guaidó, yo saldría en libertad. Eso llamó la
That drew the
atención de los
attention of the
militares
military and of President
del
Maduro's
entorno del
circle.
presidente Maduro y empezó a
And there were
circular
reports that I would be sent
la
back to
información
jail.
que me volverían a la cárcel. Yo tengo muchos
I have a lot of
compañeros que
colleagues that
todavía
are
son
still
activos
active,
y
and they warned me that I would
me
almost
advierten
certainly
de
be
que
sent back
eso
to
muy
jail.
posiblemente sucedería, que me trasladarían de nuevo a la cárcel. Yo en ese
So at
momento
that
tomé
time,
una
I made the
decisión
decision, and I thought, I
pensé,
won't go back to
yo a
jail.
la cárcel no regreso,
So it's either freedom
o es la
or death.
libertad o es la muerte. Es por ello pues que el 6 de mayo del año pasado,
That's why on May 6th last year, with the help of some
con la
colleagues,
ayuda de
active
algunos
policemen,
compañeros activos de la policía, hice una
I escaped
operación
from the back of my
salí por la
home
parte trasera de mi casa porque el frente de la casa estaba
because the
custodiado
front
por
door was guarded by
12
some
hombres de
12
la
men
policía
from the regime
del
police.
régimen. Por la parte de atrás de la casa, como tengo conocimiento de
I knew
tácticas
some police tactics,
policiales,
so I went down
hice un
by
descenso en
rappel.
rapel. Luego tomé un
Then I took a vehicle with some
con
teammates.
unos compañeros. Estuve como en
I was in 3
puntos
different sites,
escondido
hidden for around
unos
3
3
weeks
semanas
in
en
Caracas.
Caracas. Y luego
After
de
that,
esto,
I
pues,
went to the coast of the
me
country,
movilicé hacia las costas
and from
del
the coast
país.
I was able to
Desde las
take a
costas del
ship
país
that
pude
took me to
agarrar
an
una
island.
embarcación que me llevó hasta
And
una
from that
isla.
island, I took a
Y en esta
plane,
isla, pues, tomé
and I
un
finally landed
avión
in the United
con el que
States.
aterricé finalmente acá en los Estados Unidos. Gracias al apoyo, pues,
Thanks to
del
the
régimen
support
del
of
presidente
President
Trump,
Trump's administration
a la aceptación que hay del
for
reconocimiento
recognizing
de
Juan
cuando
Guaido as
todas
president.
estas cosas han sido posibles.
That's why all these things were
Luego de
possible.
estar aquí, de
After
haber
landing here and
realizado
taking
y
care of
atendido
some
ya
personal
asuntos
issues,
personales, el presidente Guaidó me
President
ha
Guaido
nombrado
designated me as the person in
la
charge,
persona encargada,
the Commissioner of Security and
de
Intelligence
seguridad e inteligencia
for President
del
Guaido
presidente Guaidó
with respect to the government of the
respecto al
United
gobierno de
States.
los Estados Unidos.
That's my
Ese es
current
el cargo que
position,
actualmente desempeño.
and my
Mi
job is to
trabajo
build a
es
relationship
establecer
and the
las
exchange of
relaciones,
intelligence,
intercambio de información,
not only with
no solamente
American
con las agencias
agencies, but
norteamericanas,
also with police
con todas las
agencies,
agencias policiales, que
which
es lo
has
que
been my job my whole life.
todavía dice, pues.
Criminal
Trabajo de investigación
investigations,
criminal
and in this case, giving information and anything necessary to erode the regime we currently have in Venezuela.
So how long did it actually take from the moment that you escaped from home to get into the United States? How long was that time period?
Más o menos 3 semanas y algo, o sea.
Around 3 weeks and a little more. I mean, I'd say almost a month since I escaped from home until I could land here in the United States. My family, my wife, because of personal issues, they were not in Venezuela. So that was important for me because I knew, as it happened in other cases, if I escaped and she was still there, she would be the one in jail now. My house was seized by the regime. It was taken from me. They kept it for themselves. There is a lawyer on my team that is in jail. It was totally irrational for them to detain him, because if even my wife didn't know about the escape plan, how could I have told my lawyer? This information had to be managed with extreme discretion, with a lot of secrecy, because the actions of the regime made it clear that if they found out what I was doing, they would just take action and I would end up dead, as other people did, who opposed the Maduro regime.
So, and also I noticed, in your photos, of course, that you have some very beautiful kids, and so they're not in the country either. Is that right?
Sí, tengo una hija mayor que vive acá en los Estados
Right.
Unidos.
I have an older daughter that lives here in the United States, in Denver,
Tengo
Colorado.
2 hijos que viven en Alemania.
She's married to an American citizen, and I have 2 sons that live in Germany. They have European citizenship and passports because of my wife. They went to a German school, and given the circumstances around us in Caracas, it was best for them to get out of Venezuela. My last name is not very common in Venezuela, so every time they said their last name, it would draw attention. So they ended up making a living in Germany, where they are completing their college degrees.
So, and ultimately, it's an incredible amount of time to be in this, even before you got home to actually, be with your wife, even though you were locked up. During those 10 years, how is it that the family stayed together?
Eso es una muy interesante pregunta. Yo creo que
It's a very interesting question. I think that's where family values come into play. My family, thank God, has very strong family values, and that's what keeps us united. I think that we just took this as a challenge. Things that happen, families go through different things. Could be an illness, could be an economic tragedy, could be... In our case, our tragedy was this one. We had to assume this responsibility, and if this is what we have to deal with it and move forward. And that's the message we always gave to our children, that staying united would give us the strength to face all this and come out victorious from this situation.
So let's go a little bit back in time, actually. What role did you have when Chavez got into power? What was your role in the police at the time?
When Hugo Chavez got into power, I was in the Criminal Investigation Agency, in the Technical Judiciary Agency, and I was the National Chief of Operations. So my position was to oversee and to audit all the operational activities inside Venezuela from the criminal investigation point of view, and to support activities whenever necessary in tactical operations, special operations. As I said before, part of my career was dedicated to tactical issues, and that's why I made that my career over there. After this, I was assigned to the Security Commissioner of Caracas. I used to belong to the National Police, but I was asked to solve crimes in Caracas. It was at that time that because of my connections to the New York police, I knew Commissioner Will Bratton and some of his staff. So we started to work and to outline some strategies, the same ones that were applied in New York to reduce crimes. We wanted to mirror their strategy in the capital city of Caracas and reduce crime. I'm afraid we were not able to do much because, as I said before, I repeat, the presence of Will Bratton and the trainings I had with the U.S. agencies made me a main target of the regime because they are socialist, communist-leaning. So from the beginning, as it was seen over time, they had hostility, aversion, hatred toward anything that represents the American soil, the American government.
So yeah, that's kind of what I want to get at, actually. You've sort of started answering my next question already, which is, how did things shift from before Hugo Chavez to after, and over what, I just paint us a picture of how things changed. And then, of course, into the Maduro regime.
Okay, first of all, the Hugo Chavez government was a puppet whose control originated in Cuba. Fidel Castro, when he was alive, adopted Chavez as his puppet in Venezuela. They were interested in it for two reasons. One, the most important one, was money. Cuba, as everyone knows, is an island that has no way of sustaining itself except with the support of outside countries. Before, it was Russia, but not anymore. So their only way to survive was with the support of another country that would subsidize everything that happens within the island of Cuba. So that was one of the reasons why Fidel was very interested in taking control of Venezuela. On the other hand, there's an organization called the Sao Paulo Forum. The Sao Paulo Forum is no more than a congregation of socialists and communists, who I consider to be criminals, that have tried to push socialism in Latin America. So that's where Kirchner is, where Evo Morales is, who was just ousted from Bolivia, and Brazil, that also had important changes. And among this group was Hugo Chavez. Hugo Chavez was the favorite son of Fidel Castro, and it was for those two reasons that those alliances were made. How did Venezuela change? Well, it was a radical change, like a 180-degree turn. The values and principles that we traditionally knew started to change. There is a strong socialist belief that only a group, an elite group within the Nicolas Maduro regime, they are the ones who get rich. Everyone else gets ripped off. They were made to believe that if you take from the rich and give to the poor, the economy will just be better. The truth is that in the end, more than 7,000 private companies stopped operating in the country. The oil industry, which is the most important sector from a financial point of view, as it provided the biggest revenue to Venezuela, is completely finished. All the training, all the government staff have been influenced by these new socialist theories. Many of the policemen, many of the army officers have been brainwashed and made to believe that socialism is the right way for people to move up. But in the end, the proof is in the pudding. Venezuela, according to organizations that analyze economics, is in an extremely poor position.
Ponen a Venezuela en una situación totalmente paupérrima. En Venezuela no hay comida.
There is no food in Venezuela. There is no medicine in Venezuela. Crime kills around 25,000 people a year. And we're talking about a country that used to have 30 million people. Now there are less than 25 million because in the last 2 years, more than 5 million people have left the country. They are not looking to fulfill any dreams. They are looking to survive. Some people come to America to pursue the American dream. But these people left their country, Venezuela, because they wanted to survive. It's a collapsed economy. However, they still control the army. And a very small number of generals are the ones that keep the control. And I'm afraid we weren't able to move toward the democracy that the country deserves and that we need to recover. In Venezuela, there is a totalitarian regime, so whoever doesn't comply or agree with the ideas promoted by the dictator, Nicolas Maduro, and his circle, simply ends up in jail or dead. The sanctions imposed on Venezuela are sanctions against individuals. The way it's been handled, the financial suffocation of the Nicolas Maduro regime, made it possible to open a door. On the other hand, to reinforce the alliance with criminal organizations and international organizations. For example, FARC, Revolutionary Armed Forces of Colombia, as well as the ELN, National Liberation Army, another Colombian guerrilla group, have both been working with Nicolas Maduro and Hugo Chavez for years. Widely known terrorist organizations like Hezbollah. The military branch of Hezbollah has operations in Venezuela, the south of the country. A place known as the Orinoco Belt was given to this terrorist organization, and from there they perform two criminal activities. One is mining exploitation, the development of all kinds of minerals there. There are diamonds, there is iron, there is copper, bauxite, and on the other side is drug trafficking. All that money is used to keep these organizations operating. The criminal organizations nowadays work as companies. They have an operational area and a financial area. The operational area is the one in charge of doing things. The financial area is in charge of managing the money, the cash flow to make things work. Hezbollah is an organization that is sponsored and fueled by Iran. That's nothing new. There's a lot of information about this. Not long ago, 2 or more well-known members of the Nicolas Maduro regime, when the Soleimani event happened, they went out to honor him in Venezuela. Why? Because in Venezuela, the Nicolas Maduro regime wants to keep a strong alliance with Iran because it helps them to set up terrorism in Venezuela, to operate money laundering for the rest of the world. As I've said on other occasions, Venezuela is now the biggest money launderer in the world because the whole regime is dedicated to that. Any criminal organization, no matter their focus, organ trafficking, drug trafficking, diamond trafficking, anything, when they need to legitimize some capital, they have to talk with the people related to the Nicolas Maduro regime so they can open the doors for them and protect them within Venezuelan territory so they can freely do their criminal activities.
It's unbelievable to hear that. But so this, of course, Secretary Pompeo has referenced this, these Hezbollah activities. It's like for making payroll, I think he called it. Is this what you're working on with the law enforcement and the intelligence community here in the U.S.? Are these issues, or is there something else too?
Sí, parte de mi trabajo es recabar toda la información que
Yes, part of my job is to collect intelligence to help solve the cases. And it leads to the conclusion that this regime is indeed facilitating, helping, collaborating with relevant criminal organizations from all over the world. This is no secret. Secretary Pompeo knows. That's how it was stated in different levels of the American government. There are two important jobs that are being done. One of these is being done by Congressman Carlos Paparoni, and along with the offices in charge of auditing these international operations, they have provided evidence of this irregular movement of money that makes it clear that those are criminal and terrorist activities. And on my side, I bring true intelligence about the presence of these groups in Venezuela. I mentioned before, for example, the case of someone who was the vice president for the economy, Tariq al-Assami, currently designated to restructure the oil industry. His father was of Syrian Shia origin, and he has had links with Hezbollah all throughout his life. In his college years, there were investigations that found that he would hide drugs or stolen vehicles, activities that were to sponsor or help terrorist groups. In this case, Hezbollah. Nowadays, he has a much stronger position, a bigger position, and he has become the key individual in Latin America, along with some others that support these groups, facilitate the cash flow that these terrorist organizations need. In every single meeting I've attended, I've always stressed this point to the representatives of the U.S. government. I warned them that only 1,200 miles away from Florida, from the United States, the most deadly criminal organizations of the planet are gathered. There they are working and planning things that, if no one acts quickly, if no one acts with diligence, they could become a threat not only to Latin America, not only to America, but to the whole world.
Well, right. So, I was reading the letter that you gave to President Trump, and you had said something that struck me, which was, saving Venezuela, is saving the world. And I think I understand what you were talking about as you're just, sharing with me. So, obviously, at this point, you're not going back to Venezuela. But so what hope do you see at this point, and what kind of, what should the international community, what should the U.S. be doing in your mind now?
The
first thing is to say that President Juan Guaido is recognized by 60 countries, and among these countries are the most important economic and political powers in the world. That makes it clear that there's an important legitimacy in the recognition of President Guaido and of those who make up his administration. On the other hand, President Trump's support has been absolutely convincing, determined, and clear, and the same with his administrative staff. Secretary Pompeo, Elliot Abrams, all of them not only care, but also take care of anything needed to restore democracy in Venezuela. I think we are in a very important phase. We are moving forward along the right path. But as I said before, it's also time to speed up. To speed up and show the teeth to these individuals. If they are not stopped in time, then when we do stop them, it will be too late. When the world found out that Hitler or Mussolini were a threat to the world, there were many that got together and decided to do something. I believe that many need to get together and realize that Nicolas Maduro, Diosdado Cabello, Tarek al-Assami, and other important groups of individuals that make a living by the regime in Venezuela are a threat. They are a threat, I insist, not only to Latin America and to America, but also to the whole world. Europe is just starting to understand that if they don't more actively engage in curbing the activities of these individuals, there will be consequences, and the price will probably be paid by innocent people.
So, your case is terrible, but sort of amazing at the same time, because now you're actually able to play this advocacy role, which is very important to you, obviously. But presumably, there's others in Venezuela who are experiencing what you experience still today. Is that right?
Sí. En Venezuela, no solamente...
Yes, in Venezuela, my case is symbolic. Maybe because of the time I was detained, and because I was one of the first ones. There are 4 of my teammates still in prison. 4 are still in jail. Many of them have served more than half of their sentences, and they should get probation. 4 honest policemen. But besides that, there are more than 700 political prisoners, more than 250 military officers. In the last 2 years, the regime has killed 279 people for participating in demonstrations or just because they spoke their minds. That's the reality of what's going on in Venezuela.
So what are next steps for you now?
I arrived in this country, and first of all, I'm grateful to the American government for all the support I was given. I'm also very grateful to the American people. We have a new life. This is a new opportunity for me. I'm very grateful, not only for me, but for the millions of Venezuelans that are here trying to realize new dreams and have a decent life. My next step is to work tirelessly for the freedom of my country. I swore to uphold the law, and that's what I will keep doing. Unless I see the Maduro regime disappear and democracy back in my country, I will keep working non-stop.
I want to say again, thank you, thank to Mr. Trump, thank to all the citizens, American citizens, and I hope that we're gonna have the democracy and the liberty in my country. Thank you very much for all.
I much appreciate it. Thank you.